Good morning. Good morning. This is Julie McDevitt here. I'm with the Teaching and Learning Center at Palo Alto College. And I'm really happy to share the presenter with you today, Daryl Brickerson. He's one of our business faculty members. He's going to be talking about work-life balance. And so I think you'll all really enjoy that. If we're a small group, so please feel free to unmute Joy and join the conversation. And I'll be here to listen and support Daryl as needed. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome, and thank you for having me. I absolutely appreciated just being a part of this experience and being able to share work-life balance webinar with our faculty. So thank you. This is going to be a very, a fire room chat conversation. So really it's just going to be us having dialogue and having conversation. When thinking about work-life balance, it really does impose in your life and then, things that you do in the workforce. And so I want this to be as candid as possible. I'm going to share some stories. Feel free. I mean, you're not obligated to, but if something moves you, then I'm definitely going to ask. It's, for you to share if you feel moved to do so.
I just want to interrupt you for a second. And if it does get, because we're so small of a group and we do share things that are personal, we can decide at the end if we don't want to share this on YouTube. So that's always, we can always do that.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Bear with me here a second. All right. And let me know if you guys can see the presentation. Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. And I hope you don't mind. I'm going to just stop my video for a second here so I can make sure I maximize all this. So balancing the beam. I really think this is a huge and very important topic. And I don't think we think enough about it when we look at it from the scale of how it truly impacts our lives, and not only our lives, but also our families, our kids, significant others. And today I want to really talk through why it's so important to making sure that you balance that beam, not only for the sake of your family, kids, financial purposes, but also for the sake of your own mental health and well-being, and making sure that you take care of yourself and you do the things that matter most. All right, so let me click here. So the objectives today, we're going to go through what is work-life balance. So define what that looks like. Talk about some of those essential elements of the well-being. We'll also talk through why work-life balance is important. Again, talking through it personally and holistically, looking at it from a short-term perspective, long-term perspective, but also looking at the lasting impacts when you think of, again, family, jobs, relationships, things, all those things, the time that you sacrifice in regards to work-life balance. We'll also look at other things that are tipping the scale. We'll talk through negativity, isolation, and then we'll talk through some tips about how to find that healthy balance. So again, this is going to be deep dialogue, just us having a fire chat conversation about what that looks like, and then we'll talk about some ways to sustain that, keeping your balance, you're being balanced, and making sure that you manage it. And of course, if we have time, we'll have time for questions, and you can ask away anything that you feel. Is that fair? All right. I see some head nods. Good.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome.
Can I ask Joy, I'm sorry, can I ask Joy what college are you from, and what do you do here?
Sure. Yes. Well, I am adjunct, and I'm full-time since COVID, but I've been adjunct with all of the corporate colleges for each of the colleges in the district, doing professional development and technology training for their external clients. And right now I am working with the HPOG program, which is the Health Professions Opportunity Grant. And so I'm one of the instructors delivering both technology and professional development training to the students going through getting their medical assistant certification, pharmacy tech, and front office.
Oh, awesome.
Wow, that is awesome. Thank you.
Very awesome.
Yeah.
Well, definitely thank you for joining us here today.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about what work-life balance is. So I know the way that work-life balance is defined is it's defined as a concept that emphasizes the benefits of balancing your time and energy between work and free time. Now, I know I've struggled with this because I think a lot of times when we think about work-life balance, we talk about those two elements, right? We talk about work and then we talk about the time outside of work, the free time that we have within life, right? I think when we start diving into what work-life balance really is, and we look at the essential elements of the well-being, your career is one of them, right? So it's your occupation and the thing that you're doing every single day. But really, when we start looking at that free time, that social component, we really have to break that down, the life piece of it, because life is it's when you share it, it sounds like it's very encompassing, right? And there's so many other things that's associated with it. And a lot of times when we think about it, we only size it up to two things, meaning your career and then your family. But we don't think about your social well-being, right? And the other people around you. So not just your family, but also friends that you engage with and people that you know. Your financial well-being, making sure that you're managing your funds and considering that as a component, right? Your physical well-being, making sure that you're exercising and taking good, great care of yourself and making sure that you're physically fit, you're eating the right foods and doing all the things that you need to remain healthy. And then also your community well-being, being involved and being, active, again, getting out and helping and assisting where you can. I think this was challenged a lot. And I think a lot of us got a chance to put it on display with what just happened with this pandemic with COVID, because COVID really, put that on the forefront. And we were able to see how all those things were challenged, right? A lot of people went through career changes and had lost their jobs. And I mean, it wasn't by choice. A lot of folks lost that social component where you couldn't really interact with family and friends and do the things that you needed to do. And it put a strain on family because some of us had family that worked in the medical industry. So we weren't able to engage with them like we normally are accustomed to doing, or we had older family members that maybe that are in, nursing homes or in that percentile where, it was more life threatening and more severe if they caught COVID. So we couldn't go around them as much. Some of us suffered financially where, again, you lost your job and or, you had some significant hits to your retirement because you had to pull from it. Maybe you had some investment issues, real estate issues, because now there was holds where you couldn't get funds. And then physically, we weren't able to go to the gym. We weren't able to work out and do the things that we were accustomed to doing. So a lot of us put on the pandemic pounds as we see kind of circulating through the internet, but we started gaining weight and things from that standpoint. And we weren't eating, correctly or eating healthy, I guess I would say, because at this point now it's, we're thrusted into this environment where we just kind of have to survive, and it changed up a lot of our eating habits. And then of course we lost that sense of community. We weren't able to get out there and really get involved. I, for one, I will share that, and I'll ask you guys, but for me personally, I really saw a difference in all of these particular categories. And it really made me do a lot of soul searching over last year, understanding that there was a huge impact when you consider just COVID, the pandemic, and all the things that occur. So I'll ask you that. I mean, did any of you guys feel like your well-being took a hit? Did you feel it over the last year or so with everything that went on with the pandemic?
Well, I can speak to that. So I probably was already the poster child of how not to live before the pandemic. I held a lot of leadership roles in the community, run my own business, and then, teach adjunct, and then have my four children, 2 bonus, and 11 grandkids. And then when I do something, I'm going to do it right. So, if you ask me to teach a course, I'm going to teach it. I'm going to make sure that sorry, the other phone is way over there. I can't reach that phone. But anyway, but when the pandemic hit, oh my goodness, I practically feel like I'm dying. And then when the, what do you call it? The winter storm hit, some illness, and so many different issues all at the same time. I practically just I don't even know how I made it out. Just real recently, I'm starting to feel like I'm maybe getting to be kind of sort of normal right now, but yeah, I took a big hit.
Bless your heart. I mean, it's one of those things that none of us can prepare for. Obviously, it came out of nowhere, and a lot of the what's transpired since. Obviously, I was in the middle of buying a home when the winter freeze hit, and I'm originally from the Midwest, so the snow, 4 to 6 inches wasn't a big deal. But when you start thinking of the catastrophic issues that occurred after it, it wasn't so much driving in it. It was now pipes are bursting, and I had 3 or 4 different issues. On top of that, I had to worry about a new home that I was acquiring, and I was in the middle of closing on and having to deal with making sure the new home was going to be okay. And so it was just all of these different things that can happen within a matter of a moment's notice. It's just boom, it happens. And now you're
And can I say something else?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then what happened at work? Okay, so we were already feeling the crunch because of COVID and transforming how things are happening, and the needs are greater for the population of students we're serving. But then the winter storm then that compounded even how I had to teach the classes and some
Absolutely.
other things. So then work multiplied, as it was already multiplied, but then it multiplied more.
No, absolutely. And I was in that shift as well. I was teaching a class and just having to deflect and really be there now for the students and understanding that they're human. We're all human. We're all going through something, and understanding that component. And then COVID didn't go away, right? So we still had students that were still battling COVID in the midst of all of that was occurring. And so what a time it is when you think about the planning and the well-being, right? Because again, it goes back to that emotional state and just making sure that you're monitoring these particular elements. So I'm going to jump into why work-life balance is extremely important, right? And there's so many reasons as to the why behind it being important. I've leveled it down to the 4 things I think that and I call it a case of the bads. And I think it's something that we all at some point in our lives we go through. I can absolutely tell you different moments where I've gone through these different things and they have occurred for me. But you don't realize how much of them really correlate with, again, balancing your life and juggling and making sure that you are really at peace in all those different areas. And so I'll start with the case of the bads. There's 4 different elements to that. It's burnout, anxiety, depression, and stress. Now, burnout, I don't know about you guys, but I get exhausted. I work as well. And just kind of hearing you speak, I work full time. I've been at USAA now, working as a banker for the last 12 years. I also work, here as an adjunct professor, and I'm going to school to get my PhD. I'm married. I have 3 kids. Like, this is all now. I have my own, business that I do and I conduct, kind of freelance, doing music and doing different things that I've done within the community because it's just my passion and it's been my way of kind of giving back. And just sharing that I go through burnout. And there's moments where if I don't plan and if I'm not meticulous about my schedule and making sure that I monitor that, it's a lot. It becomes a lot. It's that extra added pressure. And it can lead to, some other things, anxiety, depression, and stress. I mean, stress is, it's one of those major factors that causes a lot of, issues with, individuals. And I don't think we put enough emphasis into understanding how important those particular components are, to our mental health holistically. I think we move around and we do a lot of different, amazing things, but we don't understand how much that adds to it when we don't plan and we don't set goals and put boundaries and we don't become comfortable with saying no in certain moments. I think sometimes we're so comfortable with saying yes, 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 that we don't take a pause and say, no, I can't do certain things because I need to understand that it's not going to be beneficial for me in those moments. So I would ask it, have you felt that? Given with everything that's going on this year, what issues have you felt when it's come to, these particular situations, burnout, anxiety, depression, and stress? Would anyone care to share?
BADS, all of them?
Right?
You can check the box on all, right?
Burnout's a big one for me with work.
Mm-hmm.
Just feeling frustrated with the way that things are developing or, and just trying to manage working from home has been harder on me than I imagined it would be. I can say though that when the pandemic first started, it was really stressing me out, the fear of me or someone I know getting sick. And I started thinking about, death and
Yeah.
what that means. And that's, something I had never spent tons of time thinking about, but I think all of that added up. And then trying to maintain with work, it's just mentally exhausting too. I would almost add exhaustion mentally to the burnout list.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I can't stress enough how much that really weighed in on me. I was working out every single day. I was living free, spending time with, I was in my set routine, spending time with family, going to work. Everything seemed to be working perfectly. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. And I immediately felt it. And I resorted to, in the moment, just kind of losing myself to the point where I had to go to see a doctor. And at some point I was diagnosed with depression when the pandemic started, within the first month or two of it. And it was weird for me. It was uncomfortable. And again, I told you, for those that are joining, I was very open in the beginning about this being a candid conversation. So I want to be personable and I want to share. So, if you hear me sharing in a moment, I want you to understand the element to that. But there was moments where, as an African-American male, it never dawned on me that I would need to go seek help or speak to a doctor about my mental health until I was thrusted and I was literally in my home for, the first 2 to 3 months. And it was really eye-opening for me. It really put me in a situation where I needed to go to the doctor. And over the last year, I went to the doctor more times than I would probably say, combined over the last 10 years. So it was just one of those situations where I was really not in a good, stable place in the sense of, and it was all mostly mental. It was just how I was feeling in the moment. I was really feeling like I didn't know what was gonna become of us in the world. And then thinking, the whole toilet paper thing. I know we laugh about it, but it's like when the struggle really got to that point where it was that real, where people were literally going out stocking up, it puts you at that fear factor of not knowing what's next. And then I'm looking at my kids and not being able to tell them, hey, what's going to happen next? I don't know. And I'm trying to take their stress and their worry away. But it's hard as an adult because now you're walking an uncharted territory that none of us have ever been. And you're trying to figure these things out.
And I think for teachers, especially because we're such planners and we are always have to be like several steps ahead to be prepared for your class.
Right.
That uncertainty, I guess to a certain extent it's control, and controlling your environment. When you plan a lesson, you're like, let's think of all the things that could go wrong. And so you plan for those things not to go wrong. Right. And so maybe just as a profession, we may have suffered because that's an instinctual part or a skill that we've developed.
No, I agree. I think you add that extra component to it. And that's an important component because when you're taking care of other students and other people, you have to be that leader, that informal leader in those moments, even for your peers. And so when you're having to rise up in that moment, it's not, just your immediate family. There's so many other things that you have to make sure it's taken care of.
I think also like we have a really strong sense of responsibility as teachers. Mm-hmm. Whenever I do those inventories that tell me what my strengths are, like it's always responsibility. And, sometimes I'm like, why do I have to be the responsible one? I don't want to be the responsible one, but it's just part of who I am. And, right. So I think it's hard on people like that too, with that quality. Hi, right, Mallory. Thanks for joining us. Mallory's on our Teaching and Learning Center team.
Yes. Hey, Mallory, how's it going?
Hi, how's it going?
It's going good.
And, I had something to add.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found, I don't want to say stressful, but like I kind of like irritating was that the pandemic brought like a lot of like a social divide, with, some people who wanted to go out and they, needed to go out and they didn't care if they got sick or not. And they were trying to reach out through social media, getting you to come out and you just like, no. And it's like, they didn't understand why. And then it was just like really awkward and strange to kind of explain to them that, the pandemic is real, and then the political, divide on top of it. So, it kind of put a lot of strain on some friendships that, I just had to just like, okay, you do you, but I'm going to just do me, and me is indoors. Um, and, just having to awkwardly explain to them that, I'm not worried about myself. I'm worried about getting other people sick. That's why I'm staying indoors, and them just not, it was just kind of weird. Some friendships were tested, some were lost, nothing that I'm complaining over, but I just felt like that was kind of new. I didn't think that that was going to be something that would occur. I just automatically thought that, CDC, pandemic, I can understand if you have to, work, but purposely going out, to bars and everything. And, it just didn't make any sense to me.
Perfect segue into what the long or actually I'm going to come back to that because it's a perfect segue into the next section of how that really boils down and how that really correlates with how it causes other issues with people that you have, friends, family, and other people that you've been around all your life, and you start to realize that great divide. When something occurs, something historic, you start to realize where people lie. And sometimes it conflicts with where you're going and the goals and the things that you have set for yourself. And I'll actually jump to that slide because I don't think it's in any particular order. But when we start talking about those lasting impacts, when we look at it holistically and we talk about where those issues are, a lot of people aren't going to be on the same path that you're on. And so sometimes what happens is that everyone's looking at, this, what happened with the pandemic, we were all forced to kind of do a lot of soul searching within and kind of deep dive and understand where we stood. And we were forced to really kind of witness what was truly going on around the world. And we saw a lot of things that were occurring around the world. And we saw a lot of people doing things and acting out. And it's just kind of been this, this whole eye-opening experience over the last year where I think we've always subconsciously talked about these things happening. And then when the world finally slowed down, we all were forced to kind of bear witness to it. Right. And that's from, things that's happened politically. That's from things that have happened with in relations to, the police and certain communities with people of color, and into, even down to, things that happen with insurrection, all these different things that occurred, people not wanting to wear the mask versus people wearing a mask. It's just one of those things where no matter where you stood on, what line or what side you stood on, you started seeing that ultimately there were some people that weren't really willing to do what was best for us as a people holistically. And that's what's scary. When you look at the world that we're in, it's like you have to understand that, when we move and we do things, we have to think about the collective. And, I heard things about, people saying, going to your point about going out and, I don't care if I get sick, but it's like, well, what about your 80-year-old grandmother, or what about someone else's, grandmother? Like, we're seeing it in droves where there's a particular population that's not able to fight this. And it's just tough when you have to have those conversations and or separate yourself. But that's some of the things that's going to happen when you have, again, when you don't think about work-life balance and think about those impacts. I do want to share a story with you guys, if y'all don't mind. When I think about broken families and I think about the importance of having that work-life balance, and it took me some time to reflect and think about it when I was kind of building out what I wanted to talk about with this class. It made me think about my relationship with actually my parents growing up, me and my siblings. And when I think about that relationship, one of the commonalities that me and my little brother talked about with our parents was that, or most of my brothers talked about with our parents, was that they weren't around a lot. We remembered them. We remembered having parents, obviously, and we remembered them kind of being in a house, but it was one of those things where they worked 24/7. They were always at work. And so we didn't have the memories of like us doing like family activities, us going out to restaurants and us going to, on road trips and doing all these different things. We did some of those things, but it was very far few in between. And so it really hindered our relationship as we got older, when we started, once we became young adults and we started doing certain things and our parents wanted to be involved in that process, once they got to a place in life where they wanted to be involved. And it was kind of one of those things where it was like, well, now we're off doing our thing. We don't really want to slow down and go back and do these things with you right now because we're so focused on starting our families and starting our careers and doing that stuff. And it really took, when my father passed away, it's been 10 years now, but when he passed, a little over 10 years, but when he passed away, I did a little reflection in that moment because I realized how far, we get removed sometimes and how those cycles continue, right? We continue to manifest it because, and we manifest some level of hate or some level of issue with certain individuals because we felt like that relationship has been broken. There's been some bond or some level of trust that's been broken, and we immediately separate ourselves from certain individuals. And then we realize once life is over, it's like once that person's gone or we can no longer have that communication, what was it all worth? What was the point of us having that feud or having that issue? And, when you start drilling back, some of these things come down to us realizing it all comes down to that time, the time that we sacrifice. And the most important thing that we can give anybody in life is time. And because that's all we have, that's the most valuable thing that we have to offer is time, more than money or anything, because once time is gone, it's all gone. And that's where we have to really understand the importance of understanding that balance and understanding and being very transparent about it and having that communication, having that dialogue. So Mallory, I would share, thank you for sharing that, but also, be bold in having those conversations and being able to tell folks, how you feel in that moment. If it's a relationship worth saving, obviously you do what you can to save it. But also understanding that if it's not, you can't sacrifice that precious time in that moment on someone who doesn't value you or value the things that are important to you,
Yeah, and unfortunately, it wasn't kind of like my first time having to like let go of a small group of people because in my neighborhood, I became, I went to college, I went out of state, became college educated, and then all of a sudden, that just rubbed some of my friends the wrong way. And they didn't see me as, like I sold out or I left the South Side and, how could you do that? And it was that South Side mentality type of thing. So I'm already kind of gotten used to having to let go and not having to, try to fight to get them to understand me, try to get them to agree with me. I've had to learn that it's not about me trying to prove you wrong. It's just, it's how everybody else knows that I'm right. And that's okay with me. I don't need to prove to them. I already know that there's a lot of evidence out there that says that the pandemic is real. And that's good enough for me. So that's kind of how I kind of looked at it.
And that's absolutely, I mean, I can absolutely identify what you're talking about because I was in a similar circumstance growing up, in humble beginnings around certain individuals. And when you elevate in life, once you stop doing the same things that everyone else is doing, and we kind of see that in high school and as it maturates into adulthood, once you kind of get out of those certain circles and certain scenes and you no longer are doing those things and you start to move in more of a positive direction, start doing quote unquote what our parents, doing what your parents do. Some people aren't on the same maturity level. They haven't grown and they haven't evolved. And sometimes it takes people going through certain situations for them to understand the importance behind that growth and maturity. I think, not to get strongly religious in the conversation, but I think that's part of what we talk about from a religious standpoint is sometimes you have to let people kind of walk through those valleys and go through those situations and climb those mountains in order for them to understand what's truly at the top of that mountain, what's on the other side. Because otherwise, if you climb the mountain and you tell them, hey, this is what's on the other side, a lot of times, people, they're just not going to listen until they see it, and it's, unfortunate that you have to allow people to go through that. And that's even a lesson that I struggle with, knowing that one day I'm going to have to allow that to maturate even with my children, because even, you have that divide where with your children, you try to do all these things to protect them, but they don't always see it that way. And my parents did some of those same things with me, where I didn't see it as protection. I saw it as them kind of getting in the way. And then you realize years later, it's like, oh, now I see what they were talking about. And then you go on this kind of like apology tour where you're kind of like apologizing for certain little things that happen. And there's some give and take in that, right? There's some things that happen along the way where, you know, again, they're learning as parents or they're learning in the process. But I think it's just that understanding of that's the balance of life, you know, holistically when you size that up. And then kind of what we talked about, again, breaking that up when you even from work, when you size that up and you look at that component of life, it's just understanding that we have to allow sometimes people to live and go through certain situations because they're not going to appreciate it. I think of one prime example. Think of, you know, something that your parents bought you that you probably didn't, you know, it was very expensive. The first expensive item they bought you, you probably didn't take care of it as much as you did when you actually went out and bought your first expensive item that you paid with your own money that you worked hard for. And it's just that level of sacrifice and understanding. Great conversation. So just so I just want to make sure I go back to some of the long-term impacts when I was talking through it. Again, just thinking of the case of the badge and thinking of burnout, anxiety, depression, and stress. A lot of leading factors, and I know there's a lot of data that leads to it. It talks about high blood pressure, diabetes, people having heart problems, cardiovascular disease, but also it leading to suicide, you know, murder-suicide. So there's a lot of different studies that you can look into that talk through why, you know, that level of guarding your mental health is so important, because when you don't think about these things and you allow those things to fester and manifest, it could cause catastrophic issues holistically over time. And so I'm a huge proponent about planning. You have to plan in order to stop some of those things from occurring, because if you don't, it's just a spiral, a downward spiral that can lead to so many other things happening. But it's not just consistent with just, you know, having problems with your family, losing a job, or you know, going through financial ruin or any of those things. There's other things that, you know, that could definitely occur when you start thinking about it. But I'll talk through some of the, you know, the reasons why, again, why work-life balance is important. When you balance your life and you do the things that you need to do, it's been proven that you'll have less stress. You'll be able to improve your mental health. If you get yourself physically fit and do the things that you need to do, you'll feel better holistically in the long run. And then, of course, reason for it's going to enhance your ability to be present. And what we just talked about, improving those relationships. You probably didn't lose many friends, Mallory. You probably, if they weren't in your circle to begin with, then it's not necessarily a loss. It's just, it's an understanding. And I think at some point you're going to find, you know, you're probably at in that age where you're going to start identifying people, looking to identify friends and or people that are running in the same direction that you are, so to speak. And that's more or less what you want. You want people that are going to help sharpen you and help make you stronger. You know, you still have that healthy debate and still have that healthy conflict, but not to the point where it's not adding anything of value to any of your relationships. And that's what you seek. You seek to be around people that are going to, you know, I have friends that don't think all the way 100% like me, but that's what's the beauty of our friendship. We're all professionals and we're all moving in one direction, and they might have a different perspective of how they see something, and they can shed light to me and I can shed light to them, and we can help sharpen each other and make each other stronger. But we have to be able to compromise and do that. And that's going to help you when you think about improving those relationships holistically with work-life balance. We talk a little bit about engagement at work. So going back, let's flip a little bit off life and let's look at, you know, the work, you know, size of it. We don't think about how much of the relationships that we build when we think about the exchange that we have with our leaders. We want leaders that are going to listen to us and that's going to take in our feedback. If we don't have a strong relationship with our leaders, if we have a feeble relationship, then guess what? They're not going to listen to what we're saying. We're stuck in this stranger phase with our leaders. When I think of that leader member exchange, we're not strongly correlating our thoughts, and they're not taking in our feedback. We're the ones doing the day-to-day work. And so we have to figure out a way to engage. And when we do have that engagement, when we do have our leadership support and we have a mature relationship with our boss where we can have open dialogue, healthy debate, and we can say certain things, well, then it helps increase engagement at work. When you think of reason number 6, it helps with reason number 7, increasing creative thinking and making the job more productive when we get work done. And ultimately, when you think about it all, we're a little bit more happier. and we're able to gain more success because we're working at home. We're able to find that happy balance, but also at work, we're able to have that dialogue. So you try to build engagement and try to find opportunities to find partnership, not only at work, but also at home, where everyone's willing to compromise. Not saying to run away from conflict. Conflict's always going to be something that's, you just want to make sure it's healthy conflict. That's important, the word healthy in there, but you want to make sure that you can level set and have that level of compromise with your bosses and with, anyone that you're working with, even at home with your family. Make sure you have that level of compromise where there's that give or take. And sometimes we have to look at ourselves too to make sure that we're providing that. So I'll pause here. Does anyone have any comments or they want to share?
I would just say that I've had different types of leaders. And so some leaders are very boundary oriented. Mm-hmm. And so if you transgress your own boundaries working through all hours of the night, well, that's kind of on you, because it's not that the leader is imposing that on you, right? But then you have other leaders where they'll suck it all up. No, they'll call you, whatever, but you allow it, right? So they call you all hours of the night, and they just kind of have this expectation. So there's different types of leaders too that you have to, it comes down to you, I think, and how you respond, no matter which type of leader you have.
Absolutely. And I think you can't be afraid to draw those lines in the sand and say, hey, look, this is my boundaries. This is what I'm willing to do. This is what I'm willing to sacrifice. And then this is where I have to draw the line. And I try to be as transparent as possible in any given situation, and be upfront about what I can and what I can't do. And just be comfortable with what's going to come from that. And sometimes, it's okay. Sometimes you're going to get a leader that, they may not be okay with certain things, and you just have to respectfully agree to disagree. And maybe sometimes you have to think about maybe another role, or think about what's next. And I've had those tough opportunities, or I guess in the past, where I've had situations where I had to, even though I loved a certain job, I wasn't leaving, in my mind, I wasn't leaving the job. I was leaving the people that were associated around the job, because I realized that my personality was conflicting with the others' personalities within that particular space. And at the time, I was a low, hanging fruit on the totem pole, and I wasn't someone that they were looking at and really valuing my opinion in that moment. And so I had to realize that I couldn't get my point across. I couldn't enact the change that I wanted to see, or get them to compromise, or build that strong enough relationship to where they would actually value what I had to say. And so I had to recognize that I needed to make a change in my career and make an adjustment for my sanity. Because again, one of my old sayings was, when I go through the turnstiles at work, I'm leaving all my problems that I had at home at the turnstiles, because guess what? They'll be waiting for me when I get back to that turnstile when I go home, and vice versa. When I leave from work, I'm leaving all my problems at that turnstile, because they'll be waiting for me when I get back to work. So I'm not going to answer emails at night. I'm not going to answer phone calls. I'm not going to do that. I'm putting those boundaries there, and I'm letting you know that up front, because I need to have my quiet space. And I noticed that when the pandemic hit, it was challenging, because we all went from working from home, and then it became almost like your job went from being 8 hours to being 24 hours. It was like, and then I had to realize, wait a minute, time out. I got to put those boundaries back up, because what's happening is now I'm getting emails at 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. And strategically, that's strategic. I mean, you're seeing it pop up, and subconsciously they want an answer. And now you're and of course in our minds, we have it on our phones. We have all these gadgets now. Now let me just look at an email. And how many times did you have something to do where you open up that email knowing you shouldn't have opened it up, and now you're frustrated. Now you're stressed out, because you're supposed to be going to dinner and having a good time with your family, but now you're focused on what's in this email because your boss sent something late at night, and now you feel like you have to answer to it. And I
think it's also worth noting that it's not necessarily easy to set up boundaries, especially for some people, and also boundaries differ with different people in different situations. So, absolutely. I mean, we can say, okay, I've got to put up boundaries, and I can't just blink and I've got boundaries and I'm going to live by those boundaries. Like, it's not that black and white, and it's not that easy. So I just had to say
Definitely
that.
not easy.
I have a hard time sticking to things, and it's not because I don't realize that it's important to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, it's not a habit, and I let the habit slide, and then the habit's gone, and then I try to start the habit again, and then I slip, and and that is stressful in and of itself.
Well, and that's a good point, because I think sometimes there's productivity issues as well. I think
Definitely.
sometimes we see things from a different lens than maybe our counterparts. And I'm going to talk through that, actually, because it's a good segue into what else is tipping your scale, actually. Mm-hmm. So negativity. I share this because we look at this, and a lot of people will look at the glass, right? And a lot of people see this as half empty, right? I think subconsciously, most people, when they look at a glass and they see, something in it, they look at it and they go, oh, it's half empty. It's almost over. And a lot of people don't look at it and think it's half full, that it could be replenished. So you go to a restaurant, just because it's halfway down doesn't mean that the waitress is not going to come back around with that water, pitcher and fill it right back up. And I think a lot of times that's the level of negativity that we also bring to the working force, is that we don't figure out what's the best approach to getting what we need to get accomplished. We succumb to whatever we're being told, and we take that half empty mentality, and from there it generates a level of bad attitude that we may start to transpire in that moment, because we don't see it as an opportunity to find another approach to filling up that glass. We don't solutionize enough. When I used to manage teams, I noticed that particular issue. I would manage a team, and I would have, most of the, half of the team would come, and they would all have, we'd sit in our team meetings every week, and we'd talk about what we could do to make things better within our working space. But all I ever would hear was nothing but complaints. And I realized one day, I said, okay, you guys had a lot of time to think through all of these problems, right? What's the solution? And it was silence. Not one person had a solution to what we could actually do to fix the problem. So when I asked this, well, how, you guys have been talking about this, for months, going through these different things for, even in some cases, even for years. And they said, well, that's just the way it is, because management doesn't listen to us. Leaders don't listen to us. They don't allow us to do X, Y, Z. And that's just the way it is. And I said, well, now you have a leader that's going to go to bat for you. Let's figure out a solution. What can we do to fix the problems? And in the middle of, in that process of us having dialogue, having conversation, actually comprising an actual plan, we were able to show, the X's and O's, and show financially what those changes meant holistically to the organization. And we're able to show, by making a certain switch, how that would change morale and change a lot of the different issues that a lot of people were going through on this particular working team. And by just taking that subtle approach and having that dialogue, having that presentation, and going back into leadership and having that dialogue, in that particular situation, we were able to enact some change on my working team. Now, I will tell you that doesn't always happen. You don't always have those situations where it occurs. But I think what it does is it does bolster morale when people know that at least we're trying. We're not going to just step back and say we're just going to take it as is and not do anything. I think holistically, all we can do is try and try to maintain that level of positivity and saying, hey, I'm going to keep replenishing the glass, even if it's going to keep, they're going to keep digesting it, and they're not going to allow us to ultimately get there. I'm not going to let it just go completely empty and not resurface it. It's frustrating. It can become frustrating, but I think there's a level of yourself that you can, still maintain within that process. Right. So that's the biggest feedback I could give to you in that regard. I'm always
think that,
yeah.
You have to be realistic about the things that you can't change.
I understand.
In whatever system you're working in. But that is not, and I don't say that to mean you give up. You have to be, you can't, wear rose-colored glasses all the time, but what can you do within the system that's there? And that if you do it, it might in and of itself point out to the problems in the system. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't even know what I mean for sure.
No. I totally get it. I totally get it. And I think it's a lot of times I think there's a power in people, and I think there's a power in understanding. Again, it goes back to what we talked about a little bit about with the pandemic. Again, not to go into political rant or any of those kind of things, because I know this is not the right setting and the right forum. But if you think about the power of people that did push back on a lot of, because at one point, I think in the beginning when all the pandemic stuff started, we all were kind of like, this is a hoax. This is not going to happen here. Then it came here. There was a fear factor. Then a lot of us really took it seriously and said, hey, I'm not going out. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. Then there was people that wasn't, they weren't on board with it. But then I think once we started seeing, hundreds and thousands of people, dying from this, particular, disease in this particular situation, then you saw this influx of people really pushing the mask and really pushing like, we need to really take this seriously, to the point where we literally shut everything down. I would have never thought that would happen, but it did.
I think that you could also, as an example, think about all the protests, protesting anti-Black racism that have been happening in the last year too. We didn't even bring that whole thing up as one of those, a way that people are pushing back on the systems, the systemic, so I agree there has to be recognition of the limitations of the system, or the things about the system that are, and I don't know, like really sophisticated strategizing about how to push back against that. Especially about the racism stuff and, being anti-racist.
Well, and that's another great point. If you notice, there was a lot of people that
it looks like Joy wants to comment.
Oh, yeah, please, Joy, please jump on in.
Yes. I'm going to tie the two things that both of you are saying. So you were saying power of the people, and I'm going to take it both, for our social issues that we're dealing with and our workplace issues. Power of the people is real. And sometimes it seems like a system cannot change, but it's a matter of people holding to the truth, whether it's a system that can be improved. It could be just a simple task, or using how you use the LMS, or who knows, right? Or Black Lives Do Matter, whatever it might be. Sometimes people get frustrated in pushing forward, right? Because it looks like it's not going to change. It's not going to change. But if people keep holding to their truth and keep, moving forward, even in spite of what seems negative all around you, change can happen, right? It may not be overnight. It may not even be within a year, or years, decades, depending on which situation you're going to talk about.
Or 100 years.
Right.
Exactly. Centuries. Okay. So, but listen, but it can happen.
Come on, Joy.
Because there are so many examples. I live them all the time. Sometimes I'm the squeaky wheel, or it might be a group of people that we're working with, and it takes time, and it can happen even when it seems impossible. So I've seen change happen. It's just that while you're waiting for it to happen, it's so frustrating, sometimes even depressing, and very upsetting, especially if there's wrongdoing that's happening, or you've got that negative coworker that's bringing down the morale for the whole department. So it seems like they're always going to be there, so it can be frustrating. But I'm just saying, so for those of you who know your truth and you're pushing forward, try not to be weary in well-doing, because there is power of the people.
Yeah,
no, absolutely.
I like how you, I forget what I was reading. I've been trying to study some meditation things, to deal with frustration. But you may not see change in your lifetime. That's kind of it. But to know that you did what you could in the time that you had here.
Absolutely.
Love
absolutely. I love that, because that is absolutely spot on. I mean, I saw something on a meme that said, I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams. And that really resonated with me, seeing that meme, because I thought, wow, here I am. I'm living a great life. I'm doing a lot of amazing things. And, you know, to know that there was people that looked like me that weren't able to do that 100 years ago, 200. I mean, that's eye-opening. And we don't put a lot of emphasis in enough, you know, we don't think about those particular things, but we're, you know, even if you look at it generationally, if you don't go too far back, if you just look at your parents' generation or your grandparents, we're able to, you know, in all cases, we're able to do some things that they weren't able to do. And that's just mind-boggling. And, you know, so I understanding, I think it all starts with us making this world a better place, even if not for ourselves, for our kids and our children's children down the road. It's what can we do today to change that tomorrow, that future tomorrow. And it's worth that effort. You know, sometimes, you know, again, we started down this road, so I'll talk into it, but you think about.
I was going to say, I'm sorry to interrupt you again.
Yeah.
I want to give you a time check because I'm sorry if I got you totally off the track, but it just seemed like it came up for me. But 11:22 right now. So we have 8 minutes. So I don't know if you want to, how you want to proceed. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and I'll wrap into it. What I was going to say is that, you know, you think about someone like, you know, Kaepernick, he took the knee, and again, no matter what side you're on that coin, you know, he was a scapegoat in that regard. But you see that it started the conversations, and we're starting to see change moving forward. And I think it goes into, you know, some of this. I'll be quick in moving into the next slides. It's not being isolated. Again, it's taking a league and it's stepping in front. And so it's keeping that positive mentality and not seeing things negatively, but also having a positive outlook in the sense of saying, you know what, I'm not going to isolate myself and mask what's really going on and try to paint another picture of what's really happening and just leave it as it be. I'm going to paint the picture as it needs to be exposed and say, this is what's really happening. And we need to have a strong conversation. It's just like a bruise. It's going to bruise up. It's going to swell up. It's going to look much worse when it's finally healing. But eventually over time, it's going to come back to normal. But we have to figure out a way to go through this uncomfortable period. And I think that's where we're at when we think about just certain things. And it's a lot, again, it goes back to your work-life balance, looking at everything, because it all comes back to size. You know, you got to have those tough conversations. If you're working, you know, 50, 60 hours at work, you know, what are you doing to balance that beam? You're working 50, 60 hours, but you're only spending, 5-10 hours a week with your family or less. I mean, what are you doing? Or the things that matter most to you? Like, how do you balance that? And it's, again, having those tough conversations. And you see people, rather than, to avoid like midlife crisis in some of those situations, some people, I mean, they realize it's not about having all the money in the world. It's not about certain things. My happiness is more important. And I've heard that line before, and I didn't really know what that meant until I finally got to this place in life where I'm doing all of these different things. And I realized you got to be happy in what you're doing. So like, I think earlier I shared with you guys, again, I work in corporate America. I'm working as an adjunct. I'm getting my PhD. I'm married. I have kids. I have all this stuff. But I still find time for my happiness. And I still find time to make it for my kids and do all of those things because I'm a surreal like planner. Like I plan everything out. And sometimes I have to be organic. That's the feedback I get from my wife. She's like, okay, sometimes you kind of have to let things just kind of maturate. You can't just always like be on this plan, right? But I try to do that because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. And so the things that are absolutely critical, I make sure I manage and I get them done. And then the things that, I'm like, I have some time and I can kind of get myself to there. I work my way up there a lot like this presentation. I knew it was due today. And I don't think I sent you that paragraph until you kind of screamed and said, hey, make sure you get it done. But in my mind, I had it written down.
You scared me, man. You scared me. I was like, oh my God, you better not flake on me.
No, I wasn't.
I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding.
I had it all written down. I had it all written down and I was like, okay, I'm going to have it by this date. I said a month before I'm going to have it right this date.
You had it lesson planned.
Yeah, so I had it planned and it just didn't match with your plan, but it was definitely there, And so it's just understanding that. And I probably could have eased your mind and eased your stress levels if I communicated and said, hey, this is what's going on. But it's just one of those things.
No worries.
But that's the key to it all. Again, sustaining it is just really, again, communicate as much as possible, sustain as much as you can, really find your happiness. I always say, try to do something you love. I love music. I love giving back in that capacity. I could do music for 100 hours and not even get tired, not even think about it. So I usually try to go back to what I love and what I love to do. If you kind of look in my office and you see my room, like I have like nothing but studio equipment around me, and tech stuff, but I needed to find my happy place. And a lot of times that's what you need to find your happy place. If you love reading, if you love cooking, whatever it is you love to do, don't lose sight of that. I think a lot of times we hear people say you need to grow up and stop doing certain childish things. But I think sometimes you have to do those things in order to find that balance when it comes to work and family and the whole shebang. But I'll open it up. I know we got 3 minutes. Does anyone have questions? We got into a good conversation, and I apologize that we weren't able to give a little bit more time. But any other questions, comments?
I always have to just remind myself, like, what's in my control, what's out of my control, time versus money. Am I worried about the money or am I worried about the time? And those are the kind of self-checks that I have to give myself so I don't hurt other people's feelings. And, and that's just kind of how I've, tried to like work, because as a teacher, you had to keep, it didn't matter what you were going through, because as soon as you walk in that door, it was the students that were your focus.
Mhm.
You came later. And so, that was one of the things that I had to kind of self-check all the time. And even though I'm not teaching anymore, it's still very useful just for that whole stressful thing. And when you said about how, that there's power to the people, and I feel like our history has been made because of that. They always say the founding fathers, but they really weren't fathers as in the age. They were 16, they were 17, 15, and, they rebelled. And this is just a nation of rebellion, good trouble. So that's just kind of some of the things that just were brought to mind.
Absolutely.
One thing I thought of too is, as a question is, is it okay to get out of balance sometimes? Not like, well, I guess it's not really a question, but I get out of balance sometimes, and sometimes it's hard to bring those scales back into balance, but I can really feel it when I'm out of balance. And I've actually been like that the last 3 weeks. I haven't been following my things to take care of myself. And so I have been feeling not so good, like mentally and physically. So I'm slowly trying to, just try to tell myself, tomorrow's another day. You can try tomorrow, but it's you just have to keep going. It's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. And I would say when those things occur, I get out of balance. I mean, I literally start eating cookies or ice cream, and I lose my mind. I keep telling myself I need to lose 20 pounds to run this marathon this year, and I keep doing that. But I will share, like, when you have those moments, it's okay to fall. Just, you got to get back up. We fall down, but we get back up. I'm thinking of a gospel song, but you do it, and you just have to continue to remind yourself, hey, tomorrow's another day. You said it right way. Tomorrow's another day. I'm going to get back up. I'm going to keep moving forward, and I'm going to keep trying to accomplish what my ultimate goal is. And that's all we can do.
Well, I think that's a wonderful way to close. And man, I thank all of you. I thank Daryl for being here with us and sharing his ideas and allowing us this space to talk about it, because, we don't have a lot of opportunity. This is actually, part of taking care of our well-being, I think. So thank you for being here. I'm putting a link in the chat to our survey, if you wouldn't mind clicking on it and giving the TLC and Daryl a little bit of feedback. And this is our last day of webinars for the school year, but we will be back in the fall with a new series of webinars. And so please be on the lookout. And any of you would like to present, let me know. Daryl, we'd love to have you back, as we were talking earlier.
Awesome.
So
I will be back. Thank you so much.
It was nice to meet everyone. Have a wonderful
Pleasure to
day.
meet you all. Thank you, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
I'm going to keep the room open for a second to let people click on the, hi, Sylvia. I'm glad you made it. Sorry, I didn't see your email till late.
That's okay. No problem.
Yeah.
I'll have to look it over. And then again, I may need, is there a link for there's the YouTube channel. I've got it. Okay.
Yeah, click on that link and subscribe to it and save it. And then you can see, Mallory's made a ton of videos about Canvas and Zoom and stuff.
That sounds wonderful.
All right.
Thank you very much. Yeah, but when I went to register, I didn't see the Zoom link.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I
Yeah.
make mistakes often.
No, it's all right. But otherwise, I would have been here around 10:30-ish.
Yeah, I didn't see your email till about 11 because
It's
I was
okay.
in here, but I'm glad you came and thanks for being, a regular participant and
Yeah.
contributor here.
Yeah, I haven't been coming as much this spring. I got certified in fall.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I still like what y'all do.
Thank you, Sylvia. I appreciate it. Well,
Y'all
have a wonderful day. It's Friday.
Yes, you too. You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.